What's up, Midlothian Odyssey fam? How y'all doing this fine weekend? I've been real excited to upload this run, as it's one of my favorite games coupled with us going through it as my favorite character from Fallout 4. Kate is my favorite companion in 4, but Conrad Kellogg is my favorite character in the entire game. And with that said, let's check out what we'll be using this run. Kellogg's unique weapon is a 44 Magnum, and a pretty dang fun one too. I remember this being part of my arsenal during my first ever run through Fallout 4. But unfortunately, we're not using his exact handgun. Since it's a 44, we'll be rolling with a standard issue one we can obtain in New Vegas. Of course, we're starting with it as it is his main firearm. The frag grenade is cool too. Don't think we've actually had that as an available option in any of our runs up to this point. Those of you who have been on the channel for a while are welcome to correct me on that. Just one little caveat I'm going to make. Since Fallout 4 characters can melee with the butt end of a firearm, I'm thinking that for Fallout characters in these runs going forward, that I'll give them a basic melee weapon suited to them. For our protagonist, I feel like the combat knife goes perfectly with his style, which revolves around Stealth Boys, going off the showdown between him and the sole survivor at Fort Hagen. I thought about just using bare hands, but that's already an option for any character since the characters we play as know how to throw punches, thinking back to my old Fallout 3 driver Nephi run. That and unarmed builds are pretty darn good, and the combat knife also feels not only thematic, but like a good compromise. Bowie knife's a bit too strong, and the regular knife is an improvised weapon that just doesn't suit Kellogg. Should be fun to mix in with our Magnum and our grenades. And just in case you're curious, I did try to find a mod with Kellogg's outfit and his firearm in Fallout New Vegas. I was able to find one for his firearm, but I didn't want to do one without the other. If we're going to be playing with any sort of mods for Kellogg, I want the whole package, you know what I'm saying? That out of the way, let's check out Kellogg's special chosen by the devs. Maybe it's just me, but this is kinda whack. I mean, here's Preston Garvey's special allocation. Now, I love Preston and I love the Miniman, but no way in Heffel does Preston have better stats than Kellogg. I mean, Charisma, yeah, definitely I'll give Preston that one. But the others, nah, we're gonna tweak this just a little bit too. Now, in Fallout 4, the character starts with 1 in all special attributes as opposed to 5, like we get in FNV and 3, so this would scale a bit differently in this game. I decided to go with all 7s, and that's probably a severe underballing of transcribing Fallout 4's special allocation to one of the earlier games. And as mentioned before, as I wasn't able to find a mod with Kellogg's outfit, I had to go with one of the Merc outfits, and I decided on the Merc Cruiser one, as it looks the closest to what he's wearing. Also decided to allow 357 Magnum revolvers because they are Magnum revolvers, but nothing above a 44, and that's namely because I want a bit of variety. But the 357 is very weak. I really can't see us using it beyond maybe the early game. Cool? Cool. Now, for my favorite part of all Fallout video intros, setting the scene. So why exactly is Conrad Kellogg the top operative of the Institute for decades, way out here in the Mojave Wasteland? Well, believe it or not, there's actually a bit of a connection between one particular character here in New Vegas who has a history with the Institute. Not the Institute we know today led by Shaun, but what it was during the pre-war days, the CIT of Boston. Anytime you play through New Vegas and end up killing House, so 3 of the 4 main story routes, this obituary automatically appears in your Pip-Boy. Robert House was a student of the CIT, the very same institute, when he was a young man, and I had an idea so crazy it would just work, because it's definitely the kind of abstract, wild plan Father would come up with. But in order to establish this, let's dive back literal decades to when Shaun and Kellogg's paths first crossed. That's right, baby, we're flashing back all the way to Vault 111, back when both of Shaun's parents were serving as Vault 111 Frosties.
This is the one. Here.
Open it. Almost. Everything's gonna be fine.
No, I got him.
Let the boy go.
Where this timeline diverges is that after Kellogg kills the spouse, while one of the Institute goons are fiddling around with a terminal, the sole survivor's pod malfunctions. Kellogg and the scientists don't realize this at the time, as it doesn't happen immediately, but Nate, Nora, whomever we prefer, ends up suffering the same fate as the other victims of Vault 111. That is, they are killed via asphyxiation. This terrible accident took the backup out of the equation, but Kellogg's life beyond this pretty much goes the same as normal. After all, he's not the one who caused the sabotage. It was a freak accident, and the Institute scientist working on getting the crew out of Dodge would be the one held responsible. Their fate doesn't really matter within the context of this run, as that person, at best, would have been exiled and lived out their days on the surface, as this happened decades ago. Because it happened decades ago, whether or not that person was killed for their failures or whatever, they'd be gone anyway. After all, Shaun was only an infant when this happened, and Shaun is in his 60s when we encounter him in Fallout 4. Fast forward to a little under the time of the events of Fallout New Vegas take place, Shaun still harbors resentment towards Kellogg because, well, Kellogg did kill one of his parents, but since both of Shaun's parents are dead, there's no Fort Hagen to set up years later. Instead, Shaun becomes privy to the history of the Institute. Now, I'm sure that he already is, being that he ends up as the director, and he was raised by the Institute itself. Couple that with his desire to create a new, redefined mankind free of the radiation-contaminated wastrels on the surface. Let's just say instead of creating that 10-year-old synth copy of himself, as he no longer has reason to, he becomes oddly fixated on one Robert House. The last place he was rumored to be was all the way out in Nevada, and hey, guess what? Kellogg came from California, which is west of Nevada. Father personally sanctions this mission for our protagonist to look for signs of the House Empire so that we may annex them into the Institute in giant air quotes you can't see. Both Father and Kellogg would firmly believe that House is dead, because they don't know what we do. So in an effort to get his own personal revenge, Shaun sends his top operative on this daunting mission, a course of action that straight up baffles the other members of the Directorate. Again, not the first time his leadership has been called into question. Only need to point out the 10-year-old synth copy in the main timeline and the entire Institute's thoughts on that matter. And Kellogg, having been around the block for as long as he's been, knows exactly what this is. Just like he figured out the meaning of the Fort Hagen mission in the main timeline, this is a suicide mission, just a means for Shaun to get Kellogg out of his hair. You see, without either of his parents, Shaun's efforts to expedite the development and evolution of the Gen 3 synths has gone full speed ahead. In this timeline, the coursers are more refined, and as such, it's only a matter of time before Shaun selects one to replace Kellogg as the main operative for the Institute in the Commonwealth. That's probably going to be X688. Yeah, definitely going to be X688. The protagonist just doesn't understand why the old man doesn't have him killed. Maybe somewhere in his complex, methodical mind we can't possibly understand even with a 10 intelligence, there is a part of Father that actually believes that there are remnants of the House Empire to be had. That would be great for the Institute, after all. The first major pit stop for Kellogg is the capital Wasteland, where he too gets to pay a visit to our favorite plot device on this channel, given to us by the wonderful Tale of Two Wastelands devs, Union Station. Kellogg disposes of the hostiles there with ease, gets the train up and running, and because this certainly beats having to go all the way out on foot, he is kind of curious to see where this goes. But even then, there's just something gnawing away at him. Even he doesn't understand why he's going through with this. But deep down in the depths of his subconscious, and having long since come to terms with life, checking out with the West might not be so bad. It would be a good place to conclude the final chapter of his life. The other reason is because following orders is ingrained in his mind, so this does feel like business as usual, until he sits down and actually thinks about the absurdity of this mission. But hey, if he does find something, well, that'll certainly shock Father and the Institute now, won't it? When he arrives in Freeside, it's about a month before the events of Fallout New Vegas. He keeps a low profile, taking up missions to earn money, while getting a feel for the lay of the land. He knows he's in Nevada, having found that out early on, so he's in the right place. At first, it feels like finding a needle in a haystack, but apparently one of the major factions vying for power in the Mojave is indeed Mr. House. Must be one of Robert's descendants, Kellogg thinks. Our protagonist's interest is legitimately piqued. It's been way too long since any mission has felt like anything other than protocol. Conrad, during his time in the Mojave, and the time he'll continue to spend, reflects on his childhood, when his mother first gave him the iconic pistol we all know and love. He remembers that entire conversation. That's also why that's the first memory we see of him when we go through his memories in the den. And by that, I mean that Kellogg's mother was very anti-NCR in that cutscene. I wasn't about to blast you with a second one, but hey, what better thing for Kellogg to think about while he is unleashing a barrel of radioactive waste upon Cottonwood Cove? Next up, we are going to Novak, where I figure that with Kellogg's whole motivation for being here, that his journey to New Vegas would kind of mirror the courier's. But I also don't think that Kellogg would start blasting because Manny told him that there were feral ghouls. Finding out that there are actual non-feral ghouls here, Kellogg would at least hear them out because, I mean, as a mercenary, you gotta listen out for that opportunity, you know what I mean? Yeah, there's no payment to be had from Jason Bright, but because Manny Vargas' currency is information, since there are Nightkin here anyway, might as well deal with that problem as well, and the best way to deal with this problem is to kill Harland, because Harland is basically the guy holding things up. He's killing Nightkin. The Nightkin want information on Stealth Boys, and they will leave as soon as they get information on that. Killing Harland gets the actual ghouls out of Repcon, and it ensures that the Nightkin will not threaten Novak, so best of both worlds. On the note of being a mercenary, Kellogg would almost certainly be interested in the bounties on the fiends here in the Mojave Wasteland. That's definitely going to get him in the NCR's good books as a consistent, loyal, and most importantly, competent employee. And just kidding, we're going to Boulder City first because it is main story progression. Gonna get that out of the way. However, I do believe that Kellogg would be very interested in being in the NCR's good books. You gotta think about it from his perspective, is that there's two sides here. There's the NCR, the most dominant faction here in the Mojave Wasteland, despite their setbacks, or the Great Khans, a bunch of raiders who, as Yes Man likes to say, they're a bunch of dirty people who sleep in tents. Well, I just hope that Courier 6 was never into camping, because Yes Man definitely has an opinion on that. But seriously, though, there is no way that Kellogg would ever side with the Khans over the NCR, based upon the fact that the NCR is full of opportunity, and by opportunity, I mean cash to be had with all the missions they have available to clean up their own mess. You know, the funny thing about this run is that I actually never went to Red Rock Canyon a single time. It remains undiscovered by Kellogg because Kellogg does not care about Red Rock Canyon. Kellogg does not care about the Great Khans. And that's unfortunate for me as the player because Jack is an awesome vendor for chems, and those of you who have been with the channel for a while know that I absolutely adore the Great Khan armor that we get access to if we're at Accepted or higher. No such luck this run. But yeah, you'll have noticed earlier that I had a lot of trouble killing a single Great Khan. No, that's because I am not good with magnums. My bread and butter in Fallout New Vegas is unarmed, melee, and rifles. But hey, that's why they call it a challenge video. No time like the present to get better at using a magnum. And it's right around this point where Kellogg starts to realize I might actually be able to meet this quote-unquote descendant of Robert House. Again, he does not know what we know, and boy is he in for a surprise when he actually gets to meet Mr. House. But before that, though, I mentioned bounties earlier before I gave you that little fake out. No, here is where we go after Driver Nephi and his goons, and I almost always go after these guys, except with exceptions being like my Tuca Salamanca run where I actually started in Vault 3. But I figure most characters who go through here are going to be interested in this bounty, and Kellogg being a seasoned mercenary with literal decades of experience, yeah, why would he not cash in on this? For Kellogg, this is very simple, and going off of an earlier point where he reflects on his life back out here west, where he recollects his mother's words about the NCR and her thoughts on that when the radio broadcast was playing. He also remembers that his father, though he never fully knew, well, he had a pretty good idea that his father ran with some raider gang back in the day, and this has to be some manner of catharsis for him on a subconscious level that he might not even realize that he has. Now, of course, there's 250 bottle caps per fiend head that you bring to Major Daughtry, but if you talk to the 1st Recon in the form of Lieutenant Gorbitz as their leader, you can get an extra 300 bottle caps. But what I really enjoyed about this part right here is that I went from hardly being able to kill a single Great Khan to playing a game of sniping with all of Driver Nephi's goons. Well, not all of them. There's like one or two that I'm not able to snipe with my Magnum. You gotta cut me some slack, alright? Yeah, sniping with a Magnum is some serious business. Boy, that's an old term. Get with the times, Midlow. After we put down that fiend, Driver Nephi has a sliver of health, and for the first time in several challenge videos, 10 of Spades does not botch my bounty cash-in. Alright, our next destination is New Vegas, and the irony of our protagonist, who was a child during the formative years of the NCR, is now taking the monorail after being given personal clearance by the NCR and recognized as a soldier to just go right on in. So all of Kellogg's plans to get 2,000 bottle caps to pass the credit check, yeah, that's for naught. So once we get the Strip Northgate fast travel point, Kellogg is finally actually going to meet Mr. House, whom he thinks is a descendant of Robert House, but oh no, it's the real thing. It's the very same person Father was talking about all the way back in the Commonwealth of Boston. And now, because Kellogg has been functioning as a mercenary to get by, doing what he does best, that's how House knows him and thought to call upon him through Victor as a possible, shall we say, candidate, much like he had planned for Benny and Courier 6. Kellogg does not part with the information that is his true objectives because Mr. House is, I'd say, being vague, but they are at the start of their business relationship, and that's something that Kellogg can certainly appreciate. This is a great time for our protagonist to learn about Mr. House, his plans for the Mojave Wasteland, and oh boy does Kellogg not realize that his life is about to change forever. Now, Kellogg has acquired all of the evidence pointing to Benny being guilty of trying to overthrow Mr. House, as well as evidence of his murder of said courier. I didn't leave that mention out of this video. And well, I don't know about you, but I think that a fight between Benny and Kellogg, were it ever to occur, impossible though it may be, would be comically short in favor of our protagonist. Case in point right there. We get the platinum chip, bring it back to Mr. House, and well, it's time for us to start working with Mr. House because, well, again, the whole reason Kellogg was sent here was because of that suicide mission the father sent him on. But since he's here, might as well just go with the flow. And thank goodness that not only do we have a 75 science score due to Comprehension plus Programmer's Digest, but Kaiser was very kind to let us in here despite the fact that we dumped a ton of radioactive waste onto Cottonwood Cove, as well as played whack-a-mole back at Camp McCarran and took out his little insurgent. Very kind of him. But not very all the way true to Kaiser, you know what I mean? With the platinum chip installed and this wonderful little surprise waiting for Kaiser when the right time comes, it's time to make our way on over to the Boomers of Nellis, and those of you who have been with Midlothian Odyssey for quite a while know exactly what's about to come. And thankfully, I don't have to think of much of a reason for what's about to go down. Oh, and by the way, real quick, if you ever want to get the rebreather for Jack and you're looking for a pressure cooker, you can find one right here inside of the field shacks. It's right by the stove. And while I wouldn't call it player housing, it's not a bad place to rest up if you need to get your sleep deprivation down from hardcore mode. And yes, George, boy, I didn't forget about you because, well, we're about to whip out our 44 Magnum revolver and, oh, faceplant on the concrete that still exists over 200 years later. You gotta love it, man. Obligatory mention of bringing up the bomber. We had over 40 scrap metals to give Jack, so this took all of like 3 minutes to do in real time. And next up, Robert House wants us to go after the Emeritus. Turns out they are conspiring against him, and because we're able to sneak our Magnum revolver and pretty much everything else inside of this casino, and the fact we have hollow points, they're pretty amazing. Nero and Big Sal go down, absolutely no problem at all, although I have the distinct urge to just steal one of the cue balls off the table, but maybe once Caccino is out of sight, out of mind. We level up, not too bad of a level for a challenge run, I'd love to see that, and next up we are going to go to the Brotherhood of Steel. This time around, I actually did not go to Veronica. Fun fact, I didn't interact with any of the companions outside of Boone's original quest, where you have to track down the one who, did the deed to Carla, if you know what I mean. But as Kellogg is not one to make friends, very much the opposite, he's one to make a lot of enemies, I didn't interact with any of the companions as far as the companion quests go in this run. Now, I do stealth sneak attack kill this scribe right here because he seems to have like the best perception known to man, because even with Stealth Boy, he can possibly detect you. Better safe than sorry there. Other than that, not much of a problem. We killed Ranger Dobson and that one scribe before blowing that place into oblivion come. And because explosives is one of our tagged skills, because we have frag grenades and Fallout 4 characters don't have tagged skills, our explosive skill is over 50, so rescuing President Kimball on the orders of Mr. House was very, very simple. I just love that full circle feel of when Kellogg was a kid, his mother was anti-NCR, and here Kellogg is, protecting the NCR president. She would not be happy with this course of action, but we are. Next up is Eldorado Substation. Before you leave Hoover Dam after protecting President Kimball, whether you're playing for House or for the Independent run, don't forget to take the NCR engineered jumpsuit out of the locker when you're looking around doing your security sweep. That way you don't get attacked by the NCR troopers while you're inside of Eldorado Substation. Alright, it's time for the Battle of Hoover Dam in favor of Mr. House, and I gotta tell you, I like to imagine that the relationship between Kellogg and House is actually a pretty good one. Turns out that being sent on this mission that was intended to get Kellogg out of the Institute's hair once and for all, but looked more like a formality, was the best thing to happen to our protagonist. Kellogg is no stranger to high-profile figures who think they're better than the average person, and to be fair to Mr. House is quite the accomplished figure. But unlike the goons back at the Institute, House is very rough around the edges. He's tough, but he's also fair, and that's what I think Kellogg would really like about working with this guy, because House very much lets Kellogg know that his work towards securing House's dominance over the Mojave Wasteland is appreciated. But what about the other way around? What does House think about this institute back in the Commonwealth of Boston and all the things that Kellogg has told him? Well, Kellogg's story, Kellogg and House tell things about each other in little snippets. And I think that House, although he would find Kellogg's tale strange, there's no reason for Kellogg to make up something like this. How would a post-apocalyptic wastelander know about the Commonwealth, Boston, the Institute, or the CIT? Oh no, he's fully on board with this, and with everything that Kellogg has told him about the Institute, Father, all that good stuff, all the technology that the Institute has developed since the pre-war, since the bombs dropped, yeah, that's definitely going to have House's interest as far as trying to get mankind off of Earth into space, all that good stuff. But the thing is that Father counted on Kellogg never returning after this mission, fully convinced that he would die, much like in the main timeline when Shaun sends Kellogg to Fort Hagen to quote-unquote intercept the sole survivor. He has sent him there fully knowing that he's going to die, fully confident. But that's not the case this time around, and for the first time in decades, Kellogg has some semblance of free thought because he's used to following orders, having people tell him what to do. Yes, that's true here as well. He's helping Mr. House secure the Mojave after all. But he has influence in it. The last time he had any sort of positive influence in his life was when he was settling down with Sarah, and Sarah and Kellogg had Mary. The happiest time of his life. Now, of course, Kellogg is never going to get that back. Kellogg is never going to turn a new leaf or whatever. Kellogg is very much set in his ways. You're never going to get this guy to turn around. However, that is the beauty of working with someone like Mr. House. Mr. House is someone who favors results, and Kellogg, as long as he's left to his own devices, especially if he's left to his own devices, I should say, if he can get the job done his way, he is going to produce practical results. And now being privy to stuff like Gen 3 synths in general, teleportation, technology like that, you can bet that Mr. House wants to get his hands on that, but in due time. First things first, gotta secure the Mojave Wasteland. He's got a lot to talk to Kellogg about after this whole mission's done. And Mr. House, unlike Shaun, who was fully convinced Kellogg would die, House is fully convinced that Kellogg will succeed in this mission. And I do believe that Mr. House would be able to identify that Kellogg is in fact a cyborg, judging not only by what Kellogg chooses to tell Mr. House, which is a lot more than he thought he would divulge to this person, but the fact that House can probably detect the cybernetic enhancements bestowed upon Kellogg. Don't forget that Fallout 4 takes place 10 years after Fallout 3, so 6 years before Fallout New Vegas. There's a lot of little planning that can be going on here. But so far, Kellogg's journey through Hoover Dam en route to the Legate's camp is going very well. Fighting Praetorians who have fist weapons is a bit silly in Kellogg's mind, but, with all the opponents he's faced in his days, I like to think that he takes all threats seriously. And Caesar's Praetorians are a pretty darn high-level threat. I would say that the Centurions overall are the biggest threat in Caesar's Legion due to the fact that they're not limited to ballistic fist weaponry. But their conditioning makes them faster than the average man, and I believe they have a 25% speed increase every single Praetorian guard. Well, except this one. I guess he just got tuckered out and stood there as we gunned him down. That's better for us, though. And hey, just in case you were like, hey, where are the grenades in this challenge video? Because, hey, Kellogg has access to grenades, gosh darn it, so start using them. Well, my friends, you're seeing it on screen right now. My very amateurish use of grenades on full display here, just like back at the Bison Steve. Amateurish though it might be, it produced results. We won the day. Kellogg would maybe approve of that. You know, emphasis on the maybe part. Alright, time to battle Legate Lanius. We are all chemmed up. And now, this part here is absolutely hilarious to me. We're under the effects of a stealth boy. We fired at Legate Lanius 3 times with 47%, and we missed all 3 of them. Statistically improbable, but not a problem, because all we do is rise from crouching and crouch back down, and Legate Lanius is like, huh? What was that noise? I'm sorry, Legate Lanius. You're just bad at your job. Well, he didn't like that comment too much, so if you'll excuse me, I'm going to use one of the 6 turbos I managed to acquire throughout the course of this run. You can get a turbo at Boulder City on the ground, in the little store where you meet up with Jessup and decide what you want to do with him if you don't just blow him away. And Dr. Ada Strauss from Novak came in super clutch this run. Love that lady. She is awesome. Give me a sec here. Gonna use some Bleak Venom, maybe another turbo, and just start hacking away at Legate Lanius. I tell you, man, the combo of Turbo and Super Slam just absolutely destroys this guy. No wonder Kaisar banned chems from the Legion. In fact, that leads to a good question. Who developed Turbo? How does it work? And, like, why have we not found this guy? Like, Myron developed Jet in Fallout 2, right? Well, allegedly he did. But, like, where's the guy who made Turbo? I think that a chem that slows down time is a way bigger deal than Jet. Just my 2 cents. It took us a fair bit of hack and slash goodness to take out Legate Lanius, so we gotta take out his veteran legionary cheerleading squad. Not a problem for our cybernetic protag. As we mop up the B team here, I got a question for you guys. Where would you rate Kellogg on your list of favorite Fallout characters? As mentioned way back at the start of the video, he's my favorite character in Fallout 4. Probably top 5 favorites for me in Fallout, the entire franchise. Like, it's not in any order, but for me it's gonna be Richard Gray, Butch Deloria, Kellogg. I have a soft spot for Paladin Rizek, I think I pronounced that right, the bro from Fallout Tactics who whips you into shape at the start of the game. And either Raul Tejada or Kate from Fallout 4. And yet, letting Mr. House get on into some of the glory here, we get some pot shots in on General Oliver, but hey, if there's any way to send a message to the NCR and the Legion, what better way than to have Robert House take out General Oliver? And oh boy, do I think these 2 bros got a lot of planning to do. I mentioned that earlier too. But I like to think that while Kellogg thought this would be the final chapter of his life, a new one is about to be written. Kellogg in the Den's memory flashback does show that he has some resentment towards the Institute because he says they'll get what's coming to them. So here in this continuity, in this timeline, he gets to be the one to maybe turn the tables on Father. And well, let's just say that Kellogg and House are going to work towards a change in management, and this is a storyline I want to continue in a Fallout 4 challenge that I have in mind in 2025, but you're gonna have to wait for that one. We're starting our Fallout 4 challenges in 2025, and my new PC is here, my monitor is here, and once I get that all set up after peak season concludes where I work, that's going to be one of the first Fallout 4 challenge videos I tackle, but not the first. I know my first Fallout 4 challenge video, and I think that's going to be a heck of a good time. Speaking of a good time, I really hope you guys enjoyed that run. I had a lot of fun with that one, and, well, Christmas is right around the corner. The new year is already right around the corner. Can you believe that 2025 is going to be here before we know it? Well, I can't. My goodness, it's crazy to think about. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and if I don't see you in 2025. Later.